and Roger for the marvelous show just before lunchtime, and thank you for lunch as well. Just a reminder that during the next session and coming sessions, if you want to jot down your questions for some of the panelists or the moderator, you can do so as you go. And again, the address for sending your questions by email is trip2018@icao.int. So right now we're going to look at recent developments in the ICAO TRIP strategy, and I think Narjes will go right into it now. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Narjes Abdennebi, the Chief of the Facilitation Section. So Narjes, the floor is yours. Bonjour, madame.
Bonjour. Thank you, Denis. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, I will start my presentation by presenting the 3 facilitation programs that we are running here in the facilitation section. Of course, the first one, the basis, which is the regulatory framework, it is the Annex 9 facilitation. We have now a new program, which is the ICAO TRIP strategy, which has been endorsed in 2013 by the Assembly. And inside the ICAO TRIP strategy, there is also the ICAO PKD. The chapter 3 and 9 are, of course, the main SARPs related to the TRIP and PKD. The PKD is part of the 4th element of the ICAO TRIP strategy, which is inspection systems and tools. The manufacture of MRTDs, of course, it has to follow the specification of the Doc 9303. And finally, in the interoperable application, you can find API and PNR. We have heard all that this morning, but you have also the Interpol Stolen and Lost Travel Document database. So, as I said, Annex 9 facilitation, in general, it is not always so obvious to understand what is facilitation. So, the definition is in the slide. Facilitation is the efficient management of border control processes to expedite clearance of aircraft, passengers, crew, baggage, cargo, and prevent unnecessary delays so as to maintain both the security and the efficiency of the air transport operations. So this means that, in fact, Annex 9 is addressing all the aspects of the flows of the passengers, and for that it is, of course, related to several agencies, the agencies issuing the travel documents, the Department of Immigration, of Customs, the agency in charge of the quarantine, the law enforcement, the transport operators, etc., etc. So that, of course, is in fact, the state has to ensure that there is a close coordination between all these agencies in order to have an efficient flow. So, the amendments to Annex 9 are done through the facilitation panel, and the first one was held in 1997. The last one was held in April 2018. And I want to give you some examples of amendments to Annex 9, notably when it is due to advances in technologies, should it be for MRTDs, PKD, API, interactive API, automated border control systems, and electronic travel system. And in general also, the FAL panel members are trying to streamline and update the Annex 9 with the creation, for instance, of a new chapter 4 dedicated to cargo and other articles, and recently with the Amendment 26, the creation of a new chapter 9, which is dedicated to passenger data exchange systems. And you have understood from this morning discussions that this is becoming of utmost importance. So the Traveler Identification Program, ICAO TRIP strategy, it has 5 elements, starting by the evidence of identity, and Mr. Lefoyer this morning has raised this issue in order to ensure that you are delivering the passport to the right person or to the person who is rightly claiming to be this person. Then for the document issuance and control, which is the 3rd element, the state has to take all initiatives in order to ensure that there is no passports that can be stolen or theft. The inspection system and tools, I mentioned before, it is notably one of useful element is the ICAO PKD and interoperable applications. I will come back on that later on. So, as it is the case for the Annex 9, the main challenges for the implementation of the ICAO TRIP strategy is, of course, the different actors which are playing in each element of the ICAO TRIP strategy. For evidence of identity, you have the civil registries. For the MRTD, you have the TD industry and ICAO Doc 9303. For the document issuance and control, you have the TD issuance authorities. And for the inspection systems and tools, you have border control authorities. While for the interoperable applications, you have airlines and international organizations. So taking into account, in fact, these challenges in order to ensure that there is a close coordination between all these actors, we have requested recently to the states to nominate a national focal point in each civil aviation authority in order for this focal point to dispatch the information requested by ICAO in order to get the feedback. So as per today, we have 151 member states who have nominated a focal point, and I encourage the states who have not done so yet to do it as soon as possible. So, as I mentioned initially, the main Annex 9 SARPs related to the ICAO TRIP strategy are the Chapter 3, Chapter 9, and also some SARPs of Chapter 8. It is important to know that the Annex 9 is not fully audited. Only the security-related provisions are audited. And it will be now the time for me to leave the floor to my colleague Juan Lamosa, who is going to present you some results about this audit results related to security-related provision. But before giving him the floor, let me introduce him. So, Mr. Juan Lamosa is currently the Chief of the Aviation Security Audit Section in the Air Transport Bureau, where he oversees the implementation of the ICAO Universal Security Audit Program, USAP. Prior to taking over the leadership of the ISA section, Mr. Lamosa was the Chief of the Implementation Support and Development Security, ISD-SEC section, overseeing all assistance and capacity building initiatives, including the development and implementation of aviation security improvement plans, the establishment of partnerships to coordinate and improve capacity building efforts, and providing support to regional aviation security programs. Before joining ICAO, Mr. Lamosa's aviation experience includes working as a Canadian Forces pilot and as a manager of aviation security training at IATA. Juan, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. This presentation, as Narjes said, thank you very much, Narjes, is about some of the audit results and what the audit program is. So the objective of the Aviation Security Audit Program is to promote global aviation security through continuous auditing and monitoring of aviation security performance of member states. Right now, we have 16 state standards under Annex 9 that are being audited under the USAP CMA program. How do we do this, or achieve the objective? It is by determining the level of effective implementation of the critical elements of an aviation security oversight system, which means we have 8 critical elements that cover from the legal framework down to the operational implementation of the aviation security systems. And in these, we look at Annex 9 standards as well. The 9 audit areas that we cover are listed in front of you. And of course, the last one, the one that we're talking about today, is facilitation. Under the area of facilitation, we have the following standards, which are listed above, subdivided into 4 categories, covering from the national programs and air transport facilitation committees down to API. I'll be going through all of these in more detail in terms of the actual results that come from our audits. It's important to note, though, that the audit program itself is evolving. So as standards come and change, our reference points will also be adapted. So where API was actually being looked at under the second cycle of the Universal Security Audit Program when it was a recommended practice, it wasn't being looked at in the same amount of detail as it is since it became a standard and has been subdivided into additional standards themselves. So getting into the nitty-gritty of our presentation and statistics, which of course means that depending on the reference point can be taken in many different ways. 37% of audited states have approved national air transport facilitation programs based on the requirements of Annex 9. In other words, those are the states that have been audited and have met the requirements. It doesn't mean that there are not states that have national air transport facilitation programs, but are not structured or sufficiently detailed or contain enough information to serve the objective. 42% of states have established functioning national air transport facilitation committees or airport security facilitation committees or other arrangements. So the requirement is to have a coordination mechanism. One of the things that we have to remember is that when we're looking at auditing, we're not looking at strictly verbatim to what the requirement says. We're looking at the objective that is being tried to be met. So if there's an alternative way that is being done by a state, so long as they can prove or explain how this meets the objective of the standard, that would be satisfactory for us. Going on to the next slide, when we're talking about security of travel documents, 68% of states have incorporated security features into current travel documents that are regularly updated. And somebody's going to say, but you know, I've seen a lot of passports out there and they all have security features. But the standard also requires a regular updating of the security features. So when we're assessing the standard, we're looking at both the existence of security features and the system and processes in place to regularly update those security features. 76% of states audited states have effective safeguards against the theft of travel documents. And when we look at that, we're again looking at the entire process from reception of blanks to issuing of the actual passports. We're looking at the entire chain of the process. 38% of audited states have established appropriate controls over the entire travel document application, education, and issuance process. So this is where we get into the whole process itself and how the whole system is controlled, who has access to the passport issuing process, etc. And it doesn't mean that this is of all 192 states. This is of all the audited states that have been audited under the program. Excuse me. Going on to the security of travel documents, 75% of states have established policies to report to Interpol, have identified the office that is responsible, and have guidelines for communicating with Interpol. Sometimes there are regional setups that have been established. Sometimes it's individual by state. What we're looking for is, again, that there is evidence that the system is set up to make sure that the communication is done. 62% of audited states have actually reported stolen, lost, or revoked documents to Interpol for inclusion in the stolen and lost travel document database. So this is information where we're looking for evidence that the information is actually being communicated. Security of travel documents, again, for Standard 3.1.11. 90% of audited states issue only machine-readable passports. And again, when we look at passports, we say, well, all the passports that we see are machine-readable, but there are various types of passports, and these are when we're looking at the different types of passports, whether or not they are all machine-readable. Security of travel documents continued. When we're looking at convention travel documents for refugees, for example, 53% of states audited issued travel documents for refugees and stateless persons in machine-readable form. We have to remember, though, that this number of 53% of those that subscribe to the Convention on Refugees and Stateless Persons and issue travel documents. 34% of audited states issue crew member certificates. And I'm sorry, but that slide obviously was updated and not made it into that presentation. So I don't know what happened with my presentation, but it's been changed. Nope, back. It's, I just realized that the presentation that was brought up is not the one that, the latest one. Anyways, the important thing is that the actual number is 34% of states issue crew member certificates. It's not a mandatory requirement. However, if they are issued, they should be machine readable. Of interesting point here, 16% of audited states are issuing machine readable travel documents total. And again, a different number that's not on this slide, 28% of states issuing crew member certificates have appropriate security controls over the entire issuing process, which means ensuring background checks, ensuring that they're actually employed, making sure that the blank documents are being protected, and that the issuance process of the crew member certificate is being managed properly. I'm going to apologize if any of the numbers that I say don't match the ones that are on the slide, because obviously I had a small update between this presentation and the one that was sent up. Inspection of travel documents. 64% of audited states have ensured appropriate measures and procedures to assist aircraft operators in the evaluation of travel documents presented by passengers in order to deter fraud and abuse. We're talking about the requirements to make sure that aircraft operators are part of the process to make sure that travel documents that are maybe fraudulent are being stopped. This could be in the form of training for the aircraft operator staff. That could be in the form of providing staff from the state that are trained, that are going and assist in the check-in process. There are very many various forms that this can take in practice. 79% of audited states require that aircraft operators at the point of embarkation consistently take actions to ensure that persons are in possession of documents prescribed by the states of transit and destination. Again, another one that is required, and many states will issue fines if passengers are getting off the destination without proper documentation. Going on, standard 3.34.1. 82% of states have established requirements for their public authorities to seize fraudulent, falsified, counterfeit travel documents, as well as travel documents of a person impersonating the rightful owner. 66% of those have established a requirement to remove and return those documents to the appropriate authorities of the state named as the issuer or the resident diplomatic mission. One of the challenges here is that because a crime has been committed in many of these cases, then we get into the question of there's a legal due process that needs to happen in the state where the crime was committed. So then we just look to make sure that there is a process in place that recognizes the processes that may be happening in the state, and that there is a system in place to return the passport, the travel document, to the appropriate state. In practice, only 60% of audited states demonstrated that the above policies are being implemented. Often, once it goes into the legal process, it becomes an afterthought and it doesn't continue to be thought through. Finally, API, which was already discussed. 42% of audited states have introduced API, and I have to give the next number because these obviously haven't been updated. We have 80% of audited states since we've been looking more closely at API, follow the UN EDIFACT PASS list format. However, we don't have a form to test the process. We don't do tests in our audits, so we make sure that they have the proper guidance and that they're following the proper format and that they have the information available. Of course, API became only mandatory in February of this year, so we have very limited data on the actual results. And that concludes my presentation on statistics. I'll be around certainly afterwards. I apologize to the interpreters because I have a tendency to speak too fast, and I know that we're running out of time. So, if there's any questions later, I'll be around.
Thank you, Juan. So thank you, Juan, for this interesting statistics that you have shared with us. I have some questions, but I will keep them for during the Q&A session. And I would like just to remind you that the right presentation will be posted today. So don't worry if you have missed some figures. So now I would like to come back to my initial presentation. And I take this opportunity of talking about the auditing and the obligation from states to file differences, notably under the Article 38 of the Chicago Convention. There is an obligation for states to file differences from standards. And since the Assembly Resolution 3715, which has been adopted in 2010, there is also a requirement for states to file differences from recommended practices as well. So what is the best way, in fact, to file these differences is to use the EFOD system, electronic filing of differences. So the states enter into the system, EFOD system, they check the compliance checklist, they indicate compliance with and or any differences with the SARPs, and ICAO review and monitor, of course, the level of implementation. And that is very important notably for the Annex 9, because we have sent a state letter to states to enter their differences or their compliance into the EFOD regarding the Annex 9. And based on these results that we are going to present to the Council of ICAO, the Council of ICAO will take a decision if it is needed to audit the full content of Annex 9. So if it has not been done, really, I will invite you and encourage you to enter into the system. So how it is working, in fact. The state nominates a national coordinator. ICAO grants the user account to this coordinator, and then the coordinator is going to manage the user accounts for all of the state, and he will issue, of course, additional user accounts to all the people who will have to enter some differences or compliance. So now let's come back to the trip and how it is related to the traveler journey. So there are different phases here that you can see, but perhaps it is written in small fonts. You have the pre-departure, the pre-arrival, the entry, the stay, and the exit. But I would say that there is also the point zero, which is before the travel, because before there will be a need to issue a birth certificate, and as it was explained this morning by Mr. Danielle, based on this birth certificate, you will ask to have an MRTD issued, and then you can go to the next phase, which is pre-departure, to ask for permission to travel, then to make your reservation to purchase your ticket, and this will allow notably to have a passenger name record available, PNR, and then for the pre-arrival you have also the possibility, when you are going to check at the airline, the agent will swipe your passport with the machine readable zone, and it will transmit API or IAPI. So if it is IAPI, this will be transmitted in order to determine if you have the right to take the flight or not before boarding on board. And now if it is API, so it is sent to the destination state. So this, in fact, configuration is for the travel journey from the perspective of the receiving destination state. So you have seen here that we have talked a lot about API, and here I would like to mention to you what is the current status of machine-readable passports. You may recall that I have said that the airline will need to use the machine-readable zone, which is shown here in yellow, in order to send the API or the IAPI, and we have sent a state letter to our states in order to confirm if they are compliant with the standard 311.1, stating that passports issued after 24 November 2015 and which are not machine readable, states shall ensure the expiration date falls before 24 November 2015. We have received 165 answers, and on these 165 answers, 143 states mentioned that they are compliant with this standard. For the ones who are not compliant, they have indicated that some of their non-MRP will only expire after 2022. Now, let's move to the EPassport current status. So you have recognized on the right, upright, the symbol of the EPassport or biometric passport. We have, based on states and industry sources, it is evaluated that 114 member states are issuing e-passports, while we have 12 other entities that could be either Hong Kong or Macau or the UN laissez-passer or the EU laissez-passer. So more than 800 million e-passports are in circulation, but the main issue is that first we are not sure that they are fully compliant, they are all fully compliant with the Doc 9303, and the inspection of these documents lags far behind the issuance programs. I take this opportunity to remind you that issuance of e-passport is not an Annex 9 standard. So you have heard also this morning that international cooperation is really key for successful implementation of the TRIP strategy. ICAO has signed several MOU in the past and recently, notably with Interpol, with IOM in 2016, and with UNODC recently in 2018, while we are planning to sign also another MOU with the OCT, the Office of Counterterrorism of UN. On another side, UNWTO, IATA, ACI, PATA, CLIA, and WTTC and ICAO, they are part of an association which is called Uniting Travel, and the objective is, of course, to ensure that the policies of travel and tourism are aligned. So this is at the international level, but most importantly, to start the effective implementation of TRIP, there is a need to ensure the national coordination. And one of the essential steps is to establish a national air transport facilitation program. You can see here on the slide that there is a guidance material that could help the state in implementing their NATFP. here it is the example of the Dominican Republic, where I have the opportunity to attend their first NATFP, and it was really interesting to see how the coordination happened between different stakeholders, should it be airport, airlines, government agencies, etc., etc. So now we come back to the fourth element of the ICAO TRIPS strategy, which is inspection system and tools. And as I mentioned before, PKD is one of the most useful tools of this fourth element. And I will invite Christiane DerMarkar to give you some more information on that. But before, I would like to introduce her. So, Mrs. DerMarkar joined ICAO 18 years ago. For the last 11 years, she has been in charge with the implementation and operation of the ICAO PKD. She is presently the Program Officer PKD within the Facilitation section in the Air Transport Bureau. While her main role is to manage the ICAO Public Key Directory, she has been involved in the area of machine-readable travel document specifications and different elements of the ICAO TRIP strategy. She is also the secretary of the PKD board. Before her involvement with the PKD, Mrs. DerMarkar assumed different roles and positions with increasing responsibility within ICAO, notably within the joint financing section and the finance branch. Mrs. DerMarkar is a certified professional accountant speaking 4 languages. Christiane, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Narjes, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. It's nice to be here in front of you once again. I will present to you the PKD. Okay, just a second. Okay, so as mentioned earlier by Narjes, and I will not come back to that, PKD is in the facilitation section. It's part of It's one of the 3 interrelated pillars of facilitation. What I can add is that it's grounded into the TRIP strategy as in the inspection system and tool element as one of the efficient tools to validate and authenticate the content of the chip and the digital signature. Also, I need to recall the regulatory framework that is behind the PKG. So in Annex 9, Chapter 3, we have 3 recommended practices that are dedicated for the PKG. So the first 2 ones were mainly the original ones. So the states that are issuing or intending to issue e-passports are encouraged and recommended to join the PKG, and the states that implement border control checks as well, they need to use the information from the PKD to validate the e-passports at border control. But as well, the new one that was added is that the states that are utilizing ABC system should as well be using the information available into the PKG to validate the e-passports. So we have been talking of MRTDs, e-passport. What is an e-passport? I guess every one of you knows what is an e-passport. So here's a very quick definition of what we have in our documentation, document 9303 and Annex 9. So basically it's a travel document that contains a contactless integrated circuit that is embedded into it. And the eMRTD and the relation with the PKG, this is what we can explain right here. Basically, the e-passport, as we said, has a chip, and this is what makes it more secure than a regular machine-readable passport. That chip contains all the information that is already present in the data page, so the photograph, the image, and the information that is on the chip is programmed in a certain structure. So it's what we call the logical data structure with different fields where all the information that is on the data page is entered on that in the specified field. Once all is entered, so the chip is locked using a digital signature. So in order to ensure that no one else can access the chip and read and change the information, so the chip is digitally signed, and the digital signature is unique to every state. So every state has its own digital signature to sign the chip. And in order to confirm the information and the signature on the chip, border control authorities need to access public keys, public information that could entitle them to validate and to authenticate that signature on the chip. So this is the relation with the PKG, and here I can provide you with an operational view of the PKI. It's a very basic and simple structure compared to the real world, if you want, but it gives you an idea. In essence, every state has to issue one CSCA for the issuance of travel document. This CSCA will create the document signers certificate. So as its names mention, it's the document signer is the digital signature that will be signing the passport. It will be placed into the issuance process personalization, so it will be used to sign the information on the passport. And when a traveler crosses borders, the border agent will take out from the passport the chip information and will validate the digital signature against the document signer certificate of that state, and the document signer has to be also authenticated from the CSCA that was created. So basically, when all the checks are made through all the certificate, that we can be sure that the digital signature is an authentic one and that the travel document is an authentic one as well. Sorry, why it's going? I'm sorry for that. So the validation of the digital signature through the complete check of all the relevant certificate, what we call here the validation trust chain, allows the border control authority to have a high degree of confidence and to confirm that the EPassport was issued by the right authority. And once the information was entered into that passport, the information has not been changed. So that increases, of course, the trust and the confidence in the information in the physical document as well. So the PKG, in a sense, is a repository of all certificates that facilitates the validation process. In fact, it has a major role of minimizing the exchange of certificate, and that you will see on the next slide, and to ensure to every issuing authority the timely upload of its certificate so that they can be accessible by border authorities around the world. So as you can see here, you have two scenes, one on the left and one on the right. So if we start by the left, it's one way of exchanging certificates. So it's by doing it bilaterally. So states that are not in the PKG, for example, they would need to do a bilateral exchange in order to allow other states to access their information and validate their passport. Here we have an example of 8 states. So you can imagine if you have more neighboring states and you need to exchange that information with them once every 3 months or on a more frequent basis, you can imagine the challenge of doing so. So the PKG offers you, so on the right-hand side, offers you a very easy way of exchanging your certificates. You upload them and others download them in a timely manner. So why join the PKG? You have 3 perspectives. The issuer perspective. Every issuing authority has one motivation, is that the passport or the e-passport that has been issued is validated around the world by all border authorities. So that all border authorities need to access the certificate. In fact, an e-passport that cannot be validated is essentially treated as a non-electronic travel document. So a state doesn't really capitalize on the investment made to implement the e-passport. From the border perspective, performing the e-passport validation provides confidence that the travel document is a genuine one and it hasn't been altered. So this is also the motivation of every border authorities not to allow any wrong individuals into their states that have used wrong means to enter their states. And for the traveler perspective, well, the validation with using the ICAO PKG confirms the authenticity and the integrity of the chip, and by doing so facilitates the fast and secure border crossing of that citizen, which is also for every citizen, it's a good way to do proceed on their travel. Today we have 62 PKG participants. So the last 2 ones that have joined us were Mali and Côte d'Ivoire this year. All the states with the PKG are in green. The other states in yellow are the one issuing e-passports. So it's a message for these states that ICAO encouraged them to join the PKG to use and to benefit from the advantages of the PKG. The steps to join the PKG are quite simple. They're here and they are on the website. You can also, this presentation will be available to you, so you can see it on the screen and will come to talk to me. The legal framework for every state joining the PKG is the MOU. So that's the formal arrangements that every state would agree with ICAO and sign in order to be part of the PKG. This is the MOU, an example. You can find it on the website, as well as the notice of participation, that the state needs to sign, and the notice of registration as well. Examples are on the website. You can have the links. The PKG is a program that requires membership. So membership means fees. In order to be in the PKG, you have the registration fee, so it's a one-time when you join, it's $15,900, and there is also an annual fee. The annual fee for 2018 has been established around at $31,755, and the good news is that more we have participants and more we have reductions in the fee. So the fee goes down with more participation. So this is a motivation for all the other states that have not joined yet to join the PKG now. So from the date a state joins the PKG, they have 15 months to prepare for their active participation, which means start using the PKG. So during 15 months, they test the system, they connect their interface, and the first step to become active is by doing a CSCA key ceremony. CSCA is the root of trust of the chain of trust after for the validation, and this CSCA needs to be handed over to ICAO for the first time. Yesterday we have done one key ceremony, and probably tomorrow we are expecting to do another one. So this is like the first step, as I said, and there is a procedure to do so. this can be communicated to states later. So basically, to be part of the PKG is not complicated at all. All you need to do first is to review first your national legislation, to identify a budget and to set it annually, to know who is responsible and who will be responsible of the PKG in your in which agency as well, address all the technical specification and try to keep the compliance to Part 12 of Document 9303. And one of the last steps that is not required before joining, but it's an ongoing process, is to integrate your national PKD to the ICAO PKD so that you can process the information to the border control and to the border points. So we'll just finish by saying, recalling what ICAO always say, that they urge all member states to join and actively use the PKG as a means to validate and authenticate the EPassport at border controls. And you are always welcome to join us in our meetings. Last week was the 25th board meeting, and we welcomed 2 observer states, and the feedback received that it was very useful for them to be present and to hear the discussion and to establish contacts. So you are all welcome. Next board meeting probably is going to be next year, but you can always reach to us and ask all your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christiane. Okay, so we have heard Christiane presenting the PKD as an element of the inspection systems and tools, and now we are moving to the interoperable applications. So we are working closely with the UN entities, and we are working, of course, in a close relationship with the UNSC resolutions. It was mentioned, of course, this morning about these UNSC resolutions. Here it is showing that it is related to urging states to, or calling states to implement API. Since then, so this was in 2014 with the resolution 2178. Since then, now API is a standard. And here it is, what is the status as per today of the implementation of API and IAPI, 64 states. There are also other entities which are part of states, and I would say that perhaps Aruba is one of an example of that. Here, I would like to draw your attention that in the UNSC resolution 2396, it is also calling states to implement passenger name record, PNR. And this was discussed at the last facilitation panel, and taking into account the status of implementation of API, where we have a huge work to do in order to increase the number of states having implemented API, it has not been agreed that PNR should be a standard. I would like also to stress the role of visa facilitation in air transport growth. Why? Because notably in one of the recommended practice of Annex 9, it is recommended to link e-visa, electronic visa, to IAPI, and it is a recent recommended practice. As you can see here, the visa openness, more than 60% of people traveling need a visa. But the good news is that, in fact, there are more and more states implementing visa under an electronic format. As you can see here, in 2011 we have 6 states. So the visa under electronic format, it could be called e-visa, travel authorization, online application. So it is divided according to the color, the points that are on the map. So to close on the ICAO TRIP roadmap, we have developed a TRIP roadmap for the states in order to help them implement the strategy. This roadmap is available first on the site. You have the link here. But this roadmap is listing the several steps that a state has to follow and what are the milestones for that. And I'm repeating myself, but really the preliminary step is to establish a national air transport facilitation program and committees as per the standards 8.17 and 8.19 of Annex 9. The technical assistance project. We have closed recently the strengthening border control management project in the Caribbean, which was funded by the government of Canada. It was the second one, and I would like really to thank Canada for this funding. The assistance activities that we have run were, in fact, seminars, workshops, technical assessment missions in the country performed by experts, development of an ICAO training package, control of the authenticity and validity of travel documents at airport borders, and recently the development of a border control management guide. For the ICAO training package, it is available now in Arabic, English, French, and Spanish. We have had 4 deliveries in 2017 and 2018. 3 deliveries in Africa were funded by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia under the AFI-SECFAL plan. And we have trained 69 trainees from 10 states. The next course to be delivered, will be in the Middle East region. And here I would like to stress that for this course to be more efficient, the trainees need to have passport specimen in order to look at the passports and to define if it is a good one or not. And that's why it is very important for states to send us passport specimen for each kind of passport, should it be diplomatic or other. So that was an example of receiving passport specimen. This is the ICAO TRIP guide on border control management. There is also an assessment tool in it. There is 2 parts, in fact, the guidance material and at the end the assessment tool, enabling the state to assess by himself what is the status of his border control management, are the processes correct or not. Some common recommendations that we have concluded after technical assessment missions. So the states, of course, issuing EPassport should become PKD members. Implementation of API or PNR should be done in accordance with ICAO standards, specification and guidance. Interpol databases, including the SLTD, should be integrated in the border management system. And finally, appropriate training should be provided to frontline officers. As we are talking about assistance, I would like to introduce our last speaker, but not the least. So Danielle Souhami is a field operation officer with ICAO's Technical Cooperation Bureau Project Development Unit. He works as an integral part of the team that develops all projects for TCB. He joined ICAO TCB in 2001, where he brought with him a wealth of knowledge in dealing with international customers, where he was active in driving projects to fruition. He draws from his many work experiences, having worked at the World Bank, the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service in the Canadian Embassy in Tokyo, as well as Business Development Director in the private sector. He combined he combined his passion for teaching, travel, and culture when he took a position as English professor in Japan. He holds a master's degree in international relations from the Université de Montréal, as well as a graduate degree in international business from McGill University. Danielle, the floor is yours.
Merci, Narjes. Well, good afternoon. The advantage of being the last speaker is that actually my colleagues have already nicely explained all the challenges involved in developing and implementing a comprehensive and sophisticated trip strategy system, and of course the benefits that you would realize in implementing it. So it makes my job all that easier. I'm not really going to talk too much about the technical challenges involved in that. I think my colleagues have explained that pretty nicely. In fact, what I'm going to talk about is how ICAO, through its technical cooperation program, can support you in your endeavors in this strategy, as well as in others related to civil aviation, of course. And I know the coffee break is looming, so to make things a little interesting, I'm going to present our technical cooperation program using the 5 W's, is it? Why, who, when, what, where, and the H. How. That's good. So, this is it? Beautiful. First I'm going to start with why. You might be curious to why, but really, if you don't want to answer that question first, then there's no point in continuing. So why would you consider Technical Cooperation Bureau, or TCB, to help you implement your trip-related strategy? I'm just going to really, you can read this at your leisure, I'm just going to highlight 3 points, really, 3 words, and I ask you to keep those in mind, and after that, you don't have to remember anything else. But the first word is flexibility, the second word is value, and the third word is everything. What do I mean by everything? I'm going to start with that. The Technical Cooperation Bureau supports, of course, all the states in trip-related strategy, but in all civil aviation-related matters, the full spectrum. And that could generate a lot of benefits when you have projects that are tackling not just facilitation, but also aviation security and other elements, of course, whether it's airport operations, safety oversight, or environment, or anything else. I mentioned also value. Why? We're ICAO, we're UN, we're not-for-profit, we're cost recovery only. So our aim is always to provide the best service at the lowest possible cost to the states. And we want to bring that value to you. Through our experience, we've been in operation for over 65 years, so we can bring that wealth of experience to your benefit. And finally, I mentioned flexibility. This is something that's also not often discussed, but really through TCB, we can create projects and structure them any which way that's most that's optimum for your particular needs. And each state has different needs. Even though we're all striving to achieve the best civil aviation structure in the world, we have certain peculiarities that we can help address. So that's the why, or at least why part 1. Now let's go to a different question. What? So I kind of already answered that. What can TCB support? Well, we support all strategic objectives of ICAO. I have another slide. It's hidden. There's not enough time. But it has all the list of activities and areas that we support in. It's going to be in the slide presented, shared with everyone. Promised today? Yes? Good. So you'll have all that. So I'm not going to put it here so you don't have to read, so you can listen to me instead of just looking at the screen. But that's more or less what. Now I'm going to go to, there it is. It's not hidden after all. So there you go. I'm just going to slide. Now how? This is a key one. So how are we going to assist in the trip strategy? So that virtuous circle that you see there in the bottom right, it's of course holistic, and there's different components. We've seen different discussions about this. I'm not going to read this list, but what's important is that we can be there for everything or for a part of something. So whether it's just doing an assessment for the roadmap, as Narjes was mentioning, or whether it's supporting for review of documentations, whether it's regulations, operational manuals, whether it's training and capacity building of staff, or whether it's the procurement of equipment. and installing the equipment. Just outside these doors, you've seen many companies, they're showcasing the equipment that they offer. Through technical operation, we can assist you in making sure you procure the ones most suited for you with, what's that word again? Value, best value for money. So that's more or less how in the terms of trip-related activities. I'm going to discuss a bit more now in the how vis-a-vis TCB and what we offer. So this is kind of the portfolio of services, and what I mentioned earlier, the flexibility of creating and crafting a project however best to suit your needs, it's through these services or this portfolio. So the first one there that you can see, obviously, project management. So we can be there for big projects, small projects. We can have a lot bigger role or a smaller role depending on what it is you need. And usually our projects, they can be composed of the recruitment of consultants. So that's that second one over there. You see the experts. They can come in, do assessments, help you review documentations, do country training, and all these things that provide assistance and build your capacity. The other one, as I mentioned, is the procurement. So whether it's buying screening equipment, passport screening equipment, the procurement of the actual booklet of the passports, all of these things are things we've done in the past, and we can bring this knowledge, this experience to you at, again, cost recovery. We're not for profit. We're looking only at the technical merits, the best solution from an objective perspective, and ensuring compliance with ICAO SARPs, as was previously mentioned by Juan and other presentations. Finally, the training one. We can do training, as I mentioned, through seminars, OJT. We can do what we call fellowship trainings. And fellowship trainings is when we dispatch some of your nationals to training academies or universities across the world to get, whether it's refresher training, specialized training. There's, of course, the GAP catalog, so the training that was mentioned by Narjes previously. So all of these are combinations of activities that we can package into a project to meet your needs. Here are some examples of specific trip-related projects that we've implemented in the past few years. So developing the roadmap, as mentioned before by Narjes, so we've done projects like that. Tendering of EPassport system, this is an interesting one because in this particular case, the government in question had earmarked approximately $45 million for that project. And they gave it to us, and when we implemented and tendered out for it, we were able to implement for about 33 million. So that's a saving of about 12 million. That's not bad, I think. So it's something to consider. Again, best value for money. EPassport booklet, so again, reviewing to check compliance against the MRTD requirements. EPassport, e-border, e-visa, so all of the E's you can consider coming to ICAO Technical Operation Bureau. And this is important to notice that we don't work in isolation. We're part of ICAO, so we actually look very closely with our colleagues in file section, helping identify the most suitable experts, the best approach, basically the action plan for your particular needs. So these are just some examples. Oh, by the way, another example, it's not there, but the United Nations Laissez-Passer was also done through support in ICAO's Technical Operation Program. So now I'm going to go to the who. Who is TCB? Or what does TCB really do? So why would I use you? Well, here are just some numbers of last year. So I mentioned before we support all civil aviation matters. And last year we deployed 313 international experts across the world. So this is an expert coming from Europe going to Latin America or North America to Africa or Africa to Asia or vice versa in every single area of aviation. And I like to do this fun exercise if you'll permit me. Do you know how many number of working days there are in a year? It's actually 250 more or less if you discount weekends and public holidays. 313, that means we're deploying more than one expert per day. And consider that. It's different areas of aviation, different challenges. The person has to go from one place to the other. Maybe it's a team of experts. That's a pretty big feat. So I ask you, in fact, I challenge you, I dare you to find a better performer with such a big organization covering such a broad and wide scope. Training, over 7,000 in country, so we can support training over close to 600 through equipment suppliers and close to 800 in the fellowships that I previously mentioned. And of course the procurement, so last year we issued 322 purchase orders. So sometimes I'll ask, how much of this particular equipment did you buy last year? And then the state will say, oh, I bought 2 or 3. I go, well, I bought a dozen. What does that mean? That means I have a lot of experience. I can get you good prices. I can get you the technically highest quality equipment or service that you're looking for. So we're going to why part 2. The benefits of the partnership with the Technical Cooperation Bureau, or ICAO in general. So again, as I mentioned, UN agency, so we're offering transparency, neutrality, technical objectivity. We're looking at best value for money. We're looking at flexibility. Really, we're looking at helping the states implement whatever projects they need to address the particular requirements and needs. In this particular case, we're discussing about facilitation and the TRIP strategy, but it could be other elements of the aviation world as well. So, and that's something that, because you can create synergies in projects and benefit from that. This is the where. So I know you can't really read. These are the name of the countries that we have projects in. As you can see, there's probably 5 countries in the world we don't have projects in. I haven't counted recently. I know Monaco's not there, Liechtenstein's not there, Vatican's not there, but you get the picture. Pretty much we've operated in every country in the world. So we have a lot of experience. We've benefited from learning all these lessons learned that we're willing to impart in every project. So that's the where. One more question. My time's up. It's the when. The when is basically now. We're available. We're here. We have a booth in the 5th floor. Come and see us. Come and see us today, because otherwise what happens is you're going to come and see me tomorrow and say, I need something for yesterday. So don't wait. We're here. We're available. And we're passionate about it. And we want to support you. And this is it. I'll be here for any questions, I guess. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Should work.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. I have not received any question on the iPad, and we are limited in the time. So if you have any question, it is now. Otherwise, I will ask 2 or 3 questions to my colleagues in order to have perhaps more information. Okay. Juan, you have presented to us the audit results, and I would like to know on how many states you have made these audits to present these percentages.
So as I mentioned briefly during my presentation, between the second cycle and the CMA audits, we've audited 180 states. However, under the CMA, we've audited 90. But more importantly, it depends on when the standard came into validity. So standards that are more recent may only have 30 states that are based, or the numbers are based on 30 states only. So it really depends on when the standard came into applicability and whether it was part of the audit program under the CMA or since Cycle 2.
Thank you, Juan. A question for Christiane. You mentioned that there are almost 120 states issuing EPassport, and you have only 62 PKG participants. Could you please explain why?
PKG is quite complicated to understand. Well, we try to make it accessible to everyone, but the fact is, and this is actually also a question that I ask a lot, some states that come and reach out to us. First, ICAO addresses the Civil Aviation Authority. This is our main correspondent. Civil aviation can be very well motivated by the program and would like to join, but then passing that information to the right stakeholder and the agency, and as we mentioned earlier, the interagency cooperation, this can be sometimes challenging. When all stakeholders are together and aware of the issue, and there could be a political decision by the states to join, things move very fast. But in order to arrive there, a lot of outreach needs to be done, definitely within the states and within the agencies.
Thank you, Christiane, for this clarification. Danielle, I have 2 questions in one for you.
Okay.
So does TCB work only with civil aviation authorities? And does TCB provide funding for the project?
Thank you for the question. So for the first part, no, we do not work only with the civil aviation authorities, and that's actually a very relevant question for this group. So in some of our MRTD projects, we've worked with the Foreign Affairs Office, the Tourism Board, Ministry of Interior, basically whatever government, the federal police of a country, so whatever government entity is dealing with the topic, we can support them, so that's not an issue. In terms of funding, TCB itself does not provide funding. However, we are able to support in the quest for funding, which is always, of course, a challenge for any government to get donors or funding for projects, and we're willing to support, and we have projects in the past where we've worked with Inter-American Development Bank, African Development Bank, and so on and so forth. So thank you.
Thank you. So I think that I don't have the time to wrap up, but in the presentation that will be posted, you will find a slide where there is the way forward, and you will have the opportunity to read it. And of course, I am here around for the 3 days, so do not hesitate to contact me. So thank you for your attention, and let's give a round of applause to our speakers, please.
And to our moderator as well. Yes, thank you very much to the panel. Coffee break. We're going to cheat just a bit and come back 5 minutes later, okay? So I'd like to see you back at 3:50. Coffee break sponsored by Canadian Banknote, and contrary to our friend at noon, they will not be giving out samples.